Chapter 26. Someone's sleeping position is really ugly, James. If you really desire Emily so badly, then elope with her, venting your fury out on me for no reason. Are you even a man? You don't have the guts to contradict your family. Also, you don't have the guts to confess to Emily that you married me simply because of her. You're simply a cowardly man. Lisa scolded him angrily before hearing the door click. It was fully locked. James did not make a single sound the entire time. Lisa lay there waiting for a long time, but James did not react at all. She grabbed her arms as she laid down and could not help but wonder if she had gone too far out of line when chatting to James earlier. To be honest, it was understandable for him to be angry. Because of one error that she had done, it affected his initial intentions for life, of course. He was outraged. If it was not for her, his family may not have harassed him so, and may also not have used Emily to threaten him directly into a marriage. What happened with Lisa gave his family optimism, which was why the issue thus grew so urgent. However, Lisa was in a really difficult circumstance too. She had only wanted to cook up a scandal, but instead, she had mysteriously given up her first time. Thinking about it, she still felt glum. Lisa ultimately fell asleep after letting her mind run wild. Having toiled throughout the day, alone in the apartment, James heard the din outside gradually fall silent. However, he rested on his arms, unable to fall asleep. He only opened the door to the bedroom when he wanted to go to the bathroom. Lisa was curled up into a ball by the entryway, and she looked quite uncomfortable. James walked over and looked at her silently. After some time, he lowered his head and stretched his arms out to help her up. Lisa was definitely incredibly light when he carried her in his arms. He still felt as if she was weightless. Her sleeping face was squished up and had a tint of roundness, unlike her pointed chin while she was standing. When he glanced at her now, she seemed more like a newborn sleeping softly. From time to time, she would push out her tongue slightly to lick her cherry-red lips. He brought her to the bed and looked at her solemnly before shaking his head and walking into the bathroom. When he came out, she was still in deep sleep. He lifted the cover and burrowed under it, thinking to himself that both of them could put up with this arrangement, since it was for just one night. Who knew that during the night, Lisa did not keep her limbs to herself while sleeping. Just when James finally felt tired following his fight with insomnia, a hand abruptly hit his body. He clenched his teeth as he glanced down at her tiny hand. He shoved her hand aside and flipped his body around, reluctant to bother with her. Finally, after growing drowsy once more, he again felt a leg rest itself over his thigh. Just like manner, he alternated between sleep and awakeness for some time. After God knows how long, he gradually fell asleep due to exhaustion after seemingly getting used to her onslaught. When she woke up in the morning, Lisa realized with surprise that she was actually on the bed. However, she could not recall how she had arrived there. Could it be that James suddenly discovered his conscience last night and carried her onto the bed? But at this time, James was nowhere to be found in the room. Lisa hastily ran out, only to see that the entire family was sitting and enjoying breakfast in the dining room. James ate his breakfast blankly, not affording Lisa even a glance. Sarah smiled and called out to Lisa, "Come and sit down." Lisa could only glare at James slyly. This guy, was he not purposefully insulting her? He did not wake her up even after he woke up, making her become the last person to arrive at the dining room. Lisa sat down and said apologetically, "Sorry, I woke up late." All grins, Sarah continued, "No worries, you must have been weary yesterday night. James didn't wake you up because he adores you. It would be a wonder if he actually did adore her." She stared at James, who was merely holding his spoon nicely. He looked like a dignified Persian cat that was eating, his every movement so meticulous that it made him good-looking. However, he did not glance at her at all. Sarah's statements were vague and made Lisa feel even more ashamed. She had been fatigued last night since she had quarreled with James for almost of the night. In the end, not only did she fail to win, but she was also incredibly drained both psychologically and physically. When Lisa recalled this, she could not help but stare at James. James caught her stare this time, turned to her, and rolled his eyes. Sarah watched their contact and immediately started smiling. It looked like the two of them interacted quite a lot. When she initially made the two of them married, she was still apprehensive that their relationship would deteriorate, owing to James's too aloof nature. But suddenly, it looked like they actually got along very well. This child, James, was distinct from his two brothers. He did not like conversing and did not like dealing with others either. He was pompous and overbearing. When she forced him to interact with a girl, she frequently witnessed no reaction from him at all. It was absolutely remarkable that he could interact with Lisa in such a manner. Sarah said, "Lisa, you're really too skinny. Eat more." As she stated this, she frantically placed food on Lisa's plate. Lisa shouted frantically, "No need. There's no need, I can help myself." "Mother, no way, you're really too skinny," Sarah said. "Now that you're part of the family, we must make you plumper," Lisa said. "Does being slim not look good?" Sarah said, "Being slightly plumper looks good too. Why? Who dislikes it? Does James dare to give you the cold shoulder for being plump?" James gazed at Lisa. She was indeed a touch too slim. When she lay her arms on the table, the breadth of skin was white and transparent, and her arms seemed like they would break if someone tried to bend them. "There's nothing for me to dislike," he remarked. Sarah said, "See, I told you James wouldn't dislike it." Lisa gazed at James. Of course, he did not dislike it. They were in a phony marriage regardless. It would be great as long as his Emily did not get fat. So Lisa twisted her lip and murmured, "Mother, don't listen to him. Men are all the same. Although they declare that they'll like you whether or not you're obese, they still like slender women in their hearts." After hearing this, Sarah stopped before laughing out loud. There were waves of laughter at the dining table. As Sarah gazed at Lisa, she actually started to like her more and more. Her statements were humorous and her personality was pleasant. She was not pretentious at all. After eating, Sarah even gave them a stack of food to take away before reluctantly taking them out of the house. Lisa went away from the house with James in the car. Lisa tugged at James and said, "I didn't expect your mother to be such a nice person. Before this, you talked about her as if she was incredibly difficult. You terrified me to death." As James glanced at her face full with happiness, he gazed at her profoundly. He was extremely startled too. It appeared like everything proceeded perfectly when she came to his place. He could tell that everyone, whether it was his grandfather or his mother, all liked her very much. However, he still could not help but reply, "As long as it's not Emily. My mother likes everyone else." As expected, Lisa turned her head to stare at him. She pursed her lips and thought to herself that this man was definitely a jerk. Lisa then remembered that she still had numerous red packets yet to be opened. She decided to pull them out and started opening them. When she opened them and took a look, she realized that the thick red packets did not hold money. They owned title deeds. Shocked, she flicked open the deeds and was then absolutely astounded. "Good Lord, is this a red packet?" Chapter 27. "I won't let you." Nathan only glanced at her sideways before glancing back towards the front indifferently. "A title deed and property deed. Is there a problem? Your family is really too generous," Lisa said. Nathan remarked, "As the Carter family's young madam, you deserve it." Lisa responded, "So these are all given to me?" Nathan responded, "Of course they are." Lisa gazed at the title and property deeds before raising her head. "They are too valuable." "How can I accept them?" Nathan said. "Just take them. They're intended to be given to the young madam of the Carter family. And you are, in fact, the young madam, thus you don't have to feel uncomfortable." Lisa thought that his words made excellent sense. While smiling, she stared at the two red packages repeatedly. "It looks like there are some benefits to tolerating your bad temper." Nathan gazed at her. "You money grubber." Lisa was in a terrific mood. She turned her head and added, "Otherwise, what else is the point of marriage? It's either for love or for money. Obviously, marrying you out of love doesn't make sense. It's only money that would make sense." Nathan shook his head speechlessly. He looked at her smiling till her eyes became slits. Her cheeks also became a little rounder. They were white but tinged with a bit crimson, and she actually looked a little attractive. His stare fixed upon her for some time before he turned his head. However, exactly at this moment, he saw that his phone was ringing. It was a call from Emily. However, Nathan subconsciously glanced at Lisa beside him first, seeing as she was still inspecting the title document in detail. He picked up the phone. However, his voice was slightly quieter than usual. "What's up, Nathan? You promised to celebrate my birthday with me tonight. I called to confirm which restaurant." We should go to you. What do you want to eat? It's your birthday. You decide, he said. All right. Then I'll make a reservation at the Western restaurant we regularly go to, okay, Nathan? Are you feeling unwell? Why is your voice so soft? Emily asked, perplexed once again. Nathan threw a sideways peek toward the person beside him. When he saw that she had raised her eyes and looked over, he instinctively felt a bit bad. However, he said into the phone, "It's nothing, I'm in the car. We'll talk it again when I get home. Let me know after you make the reservation." "Oh, all right." Emily hung up the phone. Nathan put his phone away and stared at Lisa. "What are you looking at?" Naturally, Lisa had heard that he was having a talk with Emily, pretending to seem calm. She shrugged her shoulders and muttered, "Nothing. Only the two of us are in the car. Who else can I look at besides you?" As she said this, she bowed her head again and started stroking the title deeds, while looking like an incredibly engrossed money grubber. Nathan sucked in a deep breath before turning his head away. Lisa thought to herself, forget it. It was a phony marriage from the outset regardless. It's none of my business that he's dating someone else. The money in her hands was still the most reliable. Very shortly after, they arrived home. However, the car had just turned around a corner when another car unexpectedly crashed into it violently, within a single minute. The car was dented on one side and smoke quickly started billowing from the front. Several automobiles that had been silently following behind quickly surged over. When the car door was opened, everyone saw Nathan and Lisa holding together closely. When the accident occurred, Lisa did not realize what was happening. It was only when she was laying on his stiff and unyielding body that her head felt a little clearer. However, the inside of the car was in a complete wreck. Nathan's expression was sad and as frigid as ice. His eyes seemed to be unfocused before they eventually focused on Lisa's face. She promptly said, "How are you feeling? Nathan, are you all right?" The automobile had knocked on his side of the car and it scared her to death. However, Nathan merely stared at her pallid face. Suddenly, he appeared to recollect something and lifted her arm in one rapid motion. On her thigh, there was an evident slash, and it was impossible to determine what was blood and what was flesh. Nathan's face clouded immediately. "All of you, move aside, Madam is injured." Nathan's voice sounded unexpectedly a touch dull and harsh. Without waiting for the people outside to react, he had already pulled Lisa's arms towards him and dragged her out from below. In the single second when the accident had transpired earlier, it was Lisa who had hurled caution to the winds and pushed herself against him. If not for her, he would have been the one injured at this precise moment. Lisa only felt a flash of anguish on her body once he lifted her up in his arms. Thereafter, the discomfort began to intensify. The people outside were stunned when they spotted Nathan carrying Lisa as he walked out swiftly. They quickly followed behind him noisily. At the hospital, Lisa had lost an abnormal amount of blood, leading her to feel weak and feeble. She looked at Nathan beside her and felt his hand clutching hers. She did not know why, but with the heat of his palm reassuring her with its warmth, she appeared to sense that it was not all that painful anymore. However, as she looked down, she saw that his white shirt had been saturated with blood. She could not help but laugh. She stared at his frigid face and said, "Nathan, I'm not dying now, right?" Nathan's heart froze. He subconsciously wrinkled up his face as well. His frigid gaze lingered on Lisa in a castigating manner, but he did not dare to be too angry. "What nonsense are you spouting? You're not going to die." "But I lost a lot of blood," she continued. "The doctor is treating you. You lost a lot of blood just because a big artery in your thigh was slashed." "Ah? A major artery? It sounds scary. Tell me, if I die, will you be able to free yourself quickly and fly away with your Miss Emily?" Nathan's face clouded. There were turbulent waves in his jet black irises and his brow wrinkled. "Shut up. I won't let you die." When he heard the name Emily, he genuinely felt slightly impatient. The sense of not wanting to acknowledge her softly swelled in his heart. If she had not called, he would not have been constantly distracted, and he would have seen the irregularities outdoors. Lisa answered, "Really? But it really hurts." Nathan gazed at her petite face all wrinkled up. She looked as pale as a sheet of paper, and her little and fragile lips were shriveled together. Her look made his heart seize up. He raised his head. "Didn't you hear that? Madam said that she's in pain. Get the doctor to treat her quickly." Ryan had been following him by his side. When he observed an expression of severe gloominess overshadow Nathan's face, he swiftly turned around to urge the other folks to accelerate their speed. Nathan's attention stayed on Lisa's face. When he watched her turning her head away, seemingly to hide her pain, his eyes darkened. He used his massive hand to turn her face towards him. As he gripped her beautiful chin, his stare was black. "Look at me, don't overthink, McKay," she hummed, but she still could not endure the discomfort. Nathan's gaze landed on her lips, which had dried and withered from the enormous loss of blood. Her lips were slightly parted, her breathing was deep, and her brows had converged. He gripped her chin and moved his body to go closer to her before directly blocking her lips, which had been repeatedly expanding and shutting. Chapter 28. There's no answer to why I love you. Lisa felt as if blood had suddenly surged to her head, reducing everything to pure chaos. It was only when his slightly cool lips brushed against hers and left behind a lingering patch of dampness that she regained her senses. He had kissed her, and he was still kissing her. He daringly pulled her teeth wide and virtually looted her of all her air, without leaving her any opportunity to think at all. Their tongues smacked against one another, and his tongue wrapped around the tip of hers. With one powerful suck, all of her blood seemed to begin flowing backward, and a feeling of numbness immediately spread across her entire body. Lisa's eyes widened as she looked at his lovely face in such close proximity. A smell engulfed her. It was tinted with the heat of uncertainty, and it led her to momentarily forget her suffering. Her fingers clasped his muscular hand as the heat remaining in his palm flowed into her hand in threads. She did not experience an ounce of agony again till the doctor patched her wound up, until James slowly released her lips. Her perfume was as exquisite as he recalled. After he released her lips, the vestiges of yearning lingered between his teeth. It might have been the previous increase in adrenaline that had allowed Lisa, who had lost an inordinate amount of blood, to stay awake all this while. However, as the doctor stood up and declared that he was done treating her, she laid down and fainted immediately like a snapped thread that was released. When Lisa woke up, she discovered that there was an expanse of blue around her. There were many types of apparatus in use. She froze and fought to get up, only to drag her wound below that left her feeling a piercing pain. However, she knew that someone was still holding her hand. It was only then that she saw James laying beside the bedside, sound sleeping. Her tiny movement led him to open his eyes swiftly. "What happened?" He gazed at her with minor apprehension. "Is there anything wrong with you?" He seemed a little fatigued. Lisa could not help but wonder if he had stayed here accompanying her for the entire night. Lisa swiftly answered, No. I only pulled on my wound slightly." Upon hearing this, James hastened to stand up and lifted the cover to check her injuries. It was still firmly bound and probably would not lead to any difficulties. He let out a sigh of relief and glared at her. He said, "Be a little more careful. Don't move about for no reason." In the final night, she murmured from time to time, and her groaning made him feel uneasy. He could just hold her hand like this and stay by her throughout the night. It was only when morning came that he succumbed to his exhaustion by lying down and falling asleep. Ryan could not stand to watch him lie awake and wanted him to sleep in the adjacent hospital room. But each time he moved, Lisa would moan a few times. Thus, he lifted his hand and signaled for Ryan to depart. He stayed here looking after her the entire night. Fortunately, the doctor explained that although a major artery had ruptured, the bleeding had stopped and she was going to heal with timely treatment. However, a big amount of blood flowed from the major artery. So even though the bleeding stopped, there was still an enormous amount of blood loss, which led her to feel quite weak. The doctor also said that it was exceedingly dangerous for the big artery there to hemorrhage. If not for the early treatment, she would have likely perished within a short length of time. Lisa felt that she seemed to be in much better spirits as she gazed around the beautiful VIP ward. If not for the enormous number of apparatus, it genuinely looked nothing like a ward. She understood that she was probably all right now. At the same time as she sighed a sigh of relief, she instantly remembered. "Oh no! What about my title deed and my property deed?" James gazed at her, puzzled. "I don't know." Lisa was shocked. No way, she had put it aside someplace in her moment of concern. How could it be that no one saved it for her? Lisa replied. "How could this happen? It's such an important thing." James glanced at her intensely. "Fine, if it was really so vital, Then why didn't you hug your title and property deeds closely and huddle into a corner? You even flung them aside and jumped on me. He felt slightly remorseful towards her. He did not expect her to actually react that way. Lisa blinked. I forgot what happened. Maybe I did it in a moment of impulse. James gazed at her. Don't do it again next time. It was too dangerous, Lisa answered, of course. After being taught a lesson this time, I know what to do next time. It's only because this was my first time and I didn't have experience. So I didn't know where to hide. James shook his head. Lisa answered, all right. My property deed and title deed can be recreated, of course, if your name was on them. Then they're yours. That's great. Lisa seemed to be relieved. James responded, okay, money grubber, since this difficulty has been fixed, it's time for you to eat something. The doctor stated that she could eat when she woke up, so he had previously instructed someone at home to make something for her in advance. Now that she was awake, he called for someone to bring it over. However, she still wanted to move. So, James pressed her down. I'll feed you, just stay still. Lisa glanced at him with amazement. James had already set down a small table. He picked up the spoon and carefully scooped out a spoonful of oatmeal. Bringing it to his mouth, he breathed on it before bringing it near Lisa. Lisa watched his succession of moves. They were smooth from beginning to end, and it looked extremely good. She could not help but smile. She opened her mouth and ate it in one bite, but subconsciously bit on the spoon. James furrowed his brow, looking at her lips. They were somewhat redder than they were yesterday. With a subtle moistness brought out by the rice porridge, his throat bobbed and his brow got a little more harsh. Oh, sorry, she muttered faintly after swallowing the oatmeal in her mouth without detecting anything different. Tea about James. James remarked, can you eat a little more carefully? Although his tone was impatient, he nevertheless reached out his fingers to wipe off the porridge pouring down from the corner of her mouth. His fingers touched her soft and gentle lips. A little feeling of numbness seemed to radiate from his fingertips. Right at this moment, his cell phone that he had placed to the side unexpectedly started ringing. In response, James set down the bowl and looked at his cell phone. It was a call from Emily. James glanced at Lisa before picking up his phone and stepping out to answer it. Lisa blanked out, watching the door close. She thought to herself, there's no need to think to know who is calling. When James answered the call, he heard Emily's anxious voice. James, why didn't you come last night? You didn't answer any of my calls. Either his phone had rung once during the night, but at the time, Lisa was still in a coma, worried that it may disrupt her relaxation. James immediately told Ryan to remove the phone out of the ward. Upon hearing the indignance in Emily's voice, James said, something came up last night, so I couldn't go. I don't care what came up, James. If it happened on any other day, it would have been okay. However, yesterday was my birthday. How could you have me wait for you for so long alone? Emily started to cry again. James pondered for a time. I'm afraid today won't work. Chapter 29. I don't want scars on your body. Emily's rage was driven to its climax as she hung up the phone immediately. As James listened to the detached tone via his phone, he took a moment to focus when he saw that the doctor had arrived. He followed him into Lisa's ward. The doctor had previously checked Lisa's injury. The cut on her thigh was recuperating beautifully, and she was going to be able to walk again very soon. James observed from the side. Within the time that he went out to attend a call, she had already totally wiped out the food. Not only that, she had also begun a debate with the doctor about how the room looked so wonderful. She was very heartless and ungrateful. James looked at the scar on her thigh and remarked to the doctor, can the scar on her thigh be removed? The doctor rushed to speak to James respectfully and cautiously. That depends on the individual's body constitution. Seeing as Madam doesn't generally have any scars, she doesn't seem to be the kind to have scars. It's possible that she may heal, but with a scar this deep, it's likely to leave a bit of a scar. While stitching up the wound, he had carefully employed a style of stitching that would not leave a scar. But now, the wound still looked jagged. James did not want any scars to be left on her body. As he glanced at her wound, he scowled severely. I hope there won't be a single scar on my wife's body. Get your best doctor to come up with a solution. When the doctor heard this, his face paled and he hurriedly nodded repeatedly. When Lisa saw the doctor go, She lifted her head to whisper to James, "It looks like it'll definitely leave a slight scar. But it's alright if I'm filming, I can easily cover it up with foundation." But James glanced at her closely and whispered, "No, if this hospital can't do it, I'll hunt for the best doctor on planet to provide you the essential therapy. I will surely not leave you with a single scar." As Lisa stared at his solemn countenance, she felt a tiny warmth in her heart. She grinned at him and replied, "Why? Will you despise me for the scars on my body? Seriously, a wife who shares her husband's struggles must never be tossed aside. Did you hear that? No matter how nasty I get, you cannot put me aside." James was dumbfounded for a long time. He looked at Lisa and whispered, "Relax. I won't cast you away. I really don't want to see scars on your body." He did not want to see her get wounded, especially because of him. As he gazed at Lisa wrapped in a striped medical gown, he recalled her white, silky, and perfect skin. He immediately felt nervous considering that it could get disfigured by such a massive scar all because of him. Lisa moved slightly as she continued, glancing at him. "Or is it because you feel guilty when you look at it?" James glared at her. "What nonsense are you saying?" However, he actually felt a little bad. Lisa added, "If you really feel guilty, then treat me a little better from now on. It's good enough provided you don't kick me out for no reason." James froze. He recalled the day when he left her at the entryway. His fury had been prompted mainly because of her unnecessarily filthy mouth. From the day he was born, there had never been a single lady like her who was arrogant enough to speak to him like this. But right now, when he peered profoundly at Lisa, he merely murmured softly, "Okay." Lisa raised her head in surprise as she glanced at James. She lapsed into a short daze. What did he just say? James adjusted his attention, bowed his head and properly arranged the medicine that the doctor had given. He then started to pour water for her to swallow the pills on the first day. Lisa's wound was still hurting slightly, but because the hospital had already put the greatest treatment on her, she did not feel too horrible. That night, when it was about time, Lisa felt a little dazed and was about to go asleep. She peered at James through her narrowed eyes and asked, "What are you going to do tonight?" James said, "You don't need to worry about me. I'll just sit here." Lisa asked, "Why don't you go back and sleep?" "No need, I'll sit here and watch over you." When James considered about leaving her here alone, he just felt that she would be too lonely. After all, she was not like other people who were surrounded by their family members. She only had him as her husband. Lisa remarked, "It's really not necessary. Maybe you can go outside and find a place to sleep." James answered, "No, there are so many apparatus here at night. And you also need someone to watch over you. I'll just stay here." Then. Lisa was a bit touched. She stared at James and then looked again at her own bed. The bed in the VIP ward was substantially bigger than the normal bed. She hesitated for a minute and decisively patted her own bed. "Why don't you just come up and sleep here? The bed is spacious enough too." James's gaze flared sneakily as he gazed at the region that she had patted. However, a little thrill of secret satisfaction flitted by in his heart. As a matter of fact, he did not feel disgusted at all. Seeing as he neither rejected her offer nor agreed to it. Lisa inquired again, "Why? Are you frightened that I'll jump you? In such case, I'll put the pillow in the middle. The bed is very large. It's totally possible for us to sleep separately." James's brow wrinkled slightly. All right, then we'll do just that. Let's relax early." When she saw that he had genuinely consented, Lisa hurriedly slid to the side to allow him space. James tittied up for a little before climbing onto the bed. They slept on opposite sides with a pillow between them. However, Lisa had overestimated herself. Although she laid there like this, she kept feeling that she could sense the breathing of the man beside her despite the fact that he looked to have fallen asleep long ago and was lying totally still. Fortunately, the influence of the prescription helped her to finally fall into a deep sleep fast. James knew that the lady next to him was no longer tossing and turning, and her respiration had gradually quieted down. He realized that she was probably already asleep. Heaving a sigh, he flipped to his other side and tried to fall asleep too. However, just when he was ready to fall asleep, a leg suddenly dropped roughly on his torso. James's eyes darkened. This Lisa. Was her thigh not hurting anymore? Her injuries did not improve her terrible sleeping posture. To not touch her wound. He gripped her slim thigh and carefully slid it aside. But then, a soft arm rested on him again. James imagined that unless a knife was put between them, nothing else place there would be able to obstruct this hyperactive woman. He delicately held her arm, turned his head and softly placed it back. But then, he came face to face with her serene, sleepy face. Her crimson lips were vivid and wet right now. It appeared like this hardy woman was already dramatically different from the woman who was about to die yesterday. She had rapidly regained her vitality. Then, she arched forward. James halted. He realized that her lips were already caressing his face. If he moved a bit, he would be able to touch her delicate red lips. The moistness of her lips caused a little shiver through his body, and a spark of electricity seemed to flow through him. Staring at her mouth, he immediately felt his mouth grow dry. However, she once again began to move randomly. Her little lips directly brushed against his lips. A surge of dry heat made James wrinkle his forehead deeply. "Lisa, you're playing with fire." In a threatening tone, he spat out a warning through pursed lips. "I dare you to try moving again." However, Lisa definitely could not hear his scratchy voice at all. Chapter 30. I've gotten used to her poor, sleeping posturion's heart thumped as he glanced at her lips. They had a great shape and were moist and velvety like the wet and red flesh of fruit. However, they also seemed to have a tinge of seduction. He turned his head and softly moved closer. However, just as he inched closer, her set of wide eyes that had been placid suddenly opened. His aloof face froze then, and then as he glanced at Lisa's glassy eyes. At that point, she felt that the distance before her eyes was a little uncertain. In turn, she massaged her eyes in a haze. The influence of the drug had also deprived her of her logic. As she looked at his beautiful and perky lips before her eyes, she felt her heart itch. Sleep properly. He let out a dry cough and reached his palm out to cover her eyes. Soon later, her breathing evened out again. On the other hand, Ryan turned his head aside and did not peek at the woman beside him again. But as he closed his eyes once again, he could still feel her arm hitting his chest. He grimaced, but he seemed to have gradually gotten used to her occasional attacks. He soon went straight to sleep. On the second day, Ryan was already long gone when Lisa woke up. It was only when she was done washing up that Ryan brought breakfast over. Lisa's thigh no longer hurt inappropriately. Her mood also took a turn for the better. She looked at Ryan and added, "Just like I told you, it's definitely possible to sleep like we did last night. Look at how much sharper you look." Ryan only glanced at her silently. He did not mention about how he had discovered her draped across his body when he woke up in the morning, and how she had drooled on his neck. Just the thought of that made him feel an itch on his neck. Very shortly after, the doctor came to change Lisa's bandages again. Looking at her wound, it seemed to have gotten significantly better. However, the scar was still unsightly, and Ryan continued wearing an uncomfortable grimace. "Doctor, when will my wife's thigh recover completely?" The doctor heard Ryan's low voice when he questioned this and swiftly answered, "This will need." Before he could react, Ryan's cell phone started ringing. Ryan took a look. It was Emily. Still waiting to hear the doctor's reaction, he declined the call. Sensing the predicament, the doctor proceeded, "This is." But exactly at that moment, his cell phone started ringing again. Ryan stared at his cell phone a little impatiently. Emily's name continued flashing on the screen. At the side, Lisa lifted her head and said, "Ryan, pick up the call first, and we'll discuss it later." Ryan's face clenched. He gazed at Lisa before grudgingly turning away and heading out. While holding his phone, he picked up the phone, his irritation showing somewhat in his voice. "Emily, is something the matter?" Emily pouted playfully via the phone and added, "Why did you reject my call earlier?" Ryan was still puzzling over the doctor's words and murmured into the phone, "I was busy just now." "Why?" Emily remarked, "You didn't come to celebrate my birthday, and after that, you didn't care about me either." "Ryan, what exactly is up with you?" Ryan recalled the day of her birthday. Because of the vehicle accident that happened that day, he did not meet her, and later, he was occupied responding to Lisa's injury. "I've just gotten busier recently." Because the accident had not been made publicly known, Ryan did not notify Emily either. "Now that I'm ill, won't you come and visit me too?" Emily whined. "You're ill?" Ryan asked. Emily gulped back a sob and added, "I want you to come and keep me company." "I don't care what you're occupied with, Ryan." If you don't come to see me, I definitely won't get better right now. I feel like I'm about to die soon. Was it genuinely that severe, to the extent that she was going to die? After Ryan returned to the ward, he stated to Lisa, "Something happened to Emily. I had to walk over and have a look." Lisa spaced out. She stared at him and nodded her head. "Oh, go ahead. There are so many people watching over me here. Nothing will happen anyway." Ryan nodded and gazed at her meaningfully before stepping over to her. He extended his hand out to fold her into the blanket and positioned her exposed leg properly. "I'll call someone to look after you. You move too much when you sleep. Make sure not to touch your wound," he said. Lisa said in amazement, "When did I move in my sleep?" What happened last night came to Ryan's mind. He snorted to her and said, "You say you didn't move when you nearly flew to heaven. In any case, be a little more careful. Don't be so restless. If it starts to bleed again, your leg will be good for nothing, okay? Stop nagging. Quick, go look for Miss Emily. Doesn't she have any pressing matter?" After pondering, Ryan agreed with what she had stated. He bowed his head and headed out. He reached Emily's house after driving for about half an hour. Emily's room was like a princess's room. She lay swaddled in her blanket as she listened to the noises outside. When she dimly heard the sound of an automobile, she quickly looked at her clothes. Ryan stepped in very soon after, only to see Emily lying on the bed with half of her body exposed. Although she said she was ill, there was actually still makeup on her face when she slept in bed. Under the covers, her silk nightwear covered her very partially. She shot delicate glances at him, ones that were as silky as silk, making her look exceedingly lovely. Ryan blanked out. He glanced at her while she lay there and quietly hummed. She continued, "Ryan, if you didn't come quickly, you wouldn't have been able to see me anymore." James walked over hurriedly. "How did you fall ill when you were completely fine?" With the knowledge that he was coming, Emily had especially gotten someone to tidy up the room. She sprayed on a fresh-smelling perfume and personally selected a sexy nightgown. Her freshly bathed body carried some tenderness and loveliness with it. She looked at him gently and said grudgingly, "I don't know. I only know that on the day you didn't come, I cried the whole night. After that, I couldn't eat anything either. I called numerous doctors to come over, but none of them knew what was wrong. I thought I was dying." How was she about to die? Lisa was the one who almost died. James could not help but think of Lisa. As he looked at Emily, he was slightly angry. "Emily, I didn't go to your birthday party that day because something urgent came up. I really could not leave. Furthermore, it was a matter of life and death. I had no time to spare on other matters, including this very instance of you suddenly calling for me to come. I really shouldn't have come at all. It's only because you said you were ill." How was she really ill? He felt that Emily was truly too thoughtless this time. Emily took a glance. James was actually really angry. In the past, he could never even bear to say a single harsh word to her. She did not feel that this had anything to do with Lisa either. Her eyes darted around as she figured that the matter he had to deal with must have been very serious, which was why he was this angry. She burst out crying immediately. With tears running down her face, she quickly said to him, "James, I had no idea if something had happened to you. I was just too worried about you. I love you too much. That's why I was also very upset. You could have told me if something was up. However, you aren't even aware that I cried the entire night that day. I kept calling your number, but none of my calls got through." He watched as Emily started crying sadly. Her words were indeed moving, and James's heart softened. He lowered his voice and said to her, "All right, sorry, Emily. I spoke too severely because I was too anxious. It was I who didn't handle things properly that day and made you worry." Emily was still crying relentlessly. James could only pat her shoulder. "All right, Emily. I truly apologize." Upon hearing his sincere apology, Emily thought to herself, as expected, he still could not bear for her to cry. She bit her bottom lip and said wretchedly, "As long as you know